Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Starting Lineup here on MLSsoccer.com. I am not Andrew Ruby, I am Nick Firchau, but I'm sitting in today. I'm going to try and do my best in the world of MLS Fantasy. Luckily, I'm joined by our fantasy expert, Jason Saghini, looking at Week 10 in Fantasy Manager in MLS. You ready for some questions?
I think I can handle this. It's a different seat for me, so my angle is different.
Yeah, well, we'll give it a shot. We'll give you some the best tips for this weekend's game. Let's start off with Derek J. McCracken. Jason, what's the latest on Deshaun Brown's quad strain, and is there a good chance he'll play at home against Toronto FC?
This is a good question because a lot of fantasy owners have Deshaun Brown. Here's the deal with Brown. He's probable. He's getting back into things. The problem with him this week is that it's snowing in Colorado now. They're not going to be able to train outside, which means he's only going to have 1 day of full training before the game on Saturday. I expect him to play. I don't expect him to start just for that reason.
I think they were supposed to get 5 to 10 inches of snow in Denver the other day. Who knew it would affect the Rapids starting lineup this weekend? Next up, Alex Long. What's up with Andrew Jacobson? And is Patrice Bernier now a bench player?
All right, as far as Jacobson goes, good news on him. He'll likely be back. They don't play this week, but he'll likely be back next week when they get back on the field. As far as Bernier goes, and this actually goes for Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto right now, their lineups are very fluid because they're playing in the Amway Canadian Championship. So they have a game Wednesday night, and the lineup in that game will then dictate what their lineup is over the weekend. Bernier is a starter on this team when, all things considered. He's a starter on this team, but you have to keep in mind the Amway Canadian Championship right now is going to affect the lineups going into the weekend.
Busy time for the Canadian teams, but not for FC Dallas. They're off this week, so a couple questions about what to do with their players. Derek McCracken, does it make sense to hide my 3 Dallas players? And Matt Keys wants to know who's a cheap replacement in the back with Michel having his bye week. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. As far as Dallas players go, you can keep a couple of them on your bench. Myself, I'm keeping Michel and Matt Hedges on my bench. I had Jackson. I'm getting rid of him. It depends on what your lineup is. I mean, look, it doesn't benefit you to lose a game because you're keeping your Dallas players on your bench, especially if you're in a head-to-head league. I would say this. Keep 2 of them, probably trade 1 of them to get another starter on your team. Dallas has 2 good matchups next week, home games, so you're going to want them in your lineup in week 11.
Next up, Philip Foose with one last question about Dallas. Says, you guys really need to move Michel on FC Dallas to a midfield slot, not a defender. Do we have it wrong?
He's actually signed with FC Dallas as a left back. He was there to compete with Jair Benitez. Benitez got hurt. He came onto the field. He was so good that they wanted to keep him there. They moved him to midfield. Players aren't going to switch positions. That would throw off the game. So during the season, they won't switch positions. You're lucky if you have him as a defender. He's going to score points for you that way. And I should answer the question that you asked before because I didn't. A replacement for Michel, I think Rodney Wallace is a good replacement right now. Only $5 million. This guy was getting into the attack for the Portland Timbers, and they have a good matchup against New England at home this week.
Good question from Bryce Ambrecht. He wants to know if who should he start between Lenhart, Casey, Nagbe, and Paponi this week. Some talented guys there. Who does he go with?
Yeah, he needs 2 of them. I think Nagbe and Casey are the guys to go with. Again, Paponi, it's the fluctuation of the Montreal lineup. You don't know if he's going to be in for the Amway Canadian Championship or if he's going to be in for the weekend, a little of both, etc. As far as Steven Lenhart goes, keep him out of your lineup this week. That's all I'm saying.
A couple questions about Brad Davis and Robert Earnshaw. Brad Davis obviously had a red card last week. Cameron Evans wants to know if he's tempted to drop him after that Week 9 debacle. He also wants to know if Robert Earnshaw isn't looking so hot anymore. Does he trade either one of those guys?
I mean, if you can afford to keep Brad Davis in your lineup, he has 2 games in Week 11. He's going to be back. He's going to be rested. I'd say you put him on the bench and you go with what you have unless you need that guy. I would definitely lose Earnshaw right now. Toronto doesn't have 2 games in Week 11. They only have 1 game. You want to have a lineup of 11 guys that have 2 games in Week 11 to make the most out of that. So as far as replacements go for Earnshaw, Ryan Johnson, Marco DeVio, 2 guys who are trending upwards in the world of fantasy, same price as Earnshaw.
And Ethan Kennedy with our last question about Brad Davis. Should I take that 4-point deduction and trade Brad Davis because of his red card from last week? And if so, who do I pick up?
I mean, again, I think this depends on if you're playing head-to-head or if you're just going for your overall score. you want Davis in your lineup next week if you can handle it. If you have a head-to-head matchup and you're playing the worst guy in your league, maybe you hold on to Davis. If you're playing the best guy in your league, you need to replace him. You need to get something out of that. So as far as a replacement goes, there I would say Valeri with Portland is probably a decent pickup this week. Again, home game against New England, and then next week they're playing 2 games. Valeri and obviously Ryan Johnson. Portland has been doing better lately in the attack. These are guys who are going to get you some points.
Very high on the Portland Timbers. They got a big game on Thursday night against
the
New England Revolution.
They earned it in Kansas City.
Yeah, they've been very good lately. A couple more here. Justin Brightbill wants to know, if you could start from scratch, who would your 15 be? That's a good question.
Okay, this is a question that we probably wouldn't answer if Weeby was here because it's too long, but I'll take a stab at it, and this is what it looks like. I'd go with Clint Irwin in goal and take Fernandez from Dallas as my backup this week because obviously Dallas doesn't have a game. In the back, Myers, Collin, Rodney Wallace, Beitashour, and Michel. In the midfield, Zuzi, Marvin Chavez from San Jose. You can tell I'm kind of big on San Jose's schedule coming up. Boniek Garcia, Javier Morales, Diego Valeri. And up front, Ryan Johnson, and then I would go with Deshaun Brown and Kakuta Mana. And the significance of this is, if I was starting a team today and I wanted consistent points, I would play more defenders and midfielders than I would forwards. Forwards are very streaky with points. You have to get a guy scoring to earn you points. So I would probably play with 5 defenders, and only 1 forward because of that. Mana is a guy who's interesting moving forward. We don't know how much regular playing time he's going to get right now. And I said Deshaun Brown will probably be a starter come next week, but this week he's not.
A couple questions about captains, always a big part of the fantasy game. Chris Tobin wants to know, Landon Donovan, fantasy captain. Discuss. What do we say?
Not yet. I would say if he gets back on the field and is playing regularly over the next 2 weeks, you want him as your fantasy captain in week 12 when the LA Galaxy have 2 games.
Last but not least, Mohamed Al-Hendi says, of David Ferreira, Thierry Henry, Federico Higuain, or Graham Zusi, some talented players there, who does he make his captain?
This goes along with what I've been saying. Graham Zusi is a player who's going to be a little more consistent with his scoring. If Henry or Higuain don't score a goal, there's probably not a ton of points there. So I say go with Zusi as your captain. As far as Ferreira goes, he's not playing this week, so he should be on your bench.
Make sure you log on, fantasy.mlssoccer.com. Set those starting lineups by 10:15 p.m. Eastern on Thursday night. There's a Thursday night game, Portland Timbers and the New England Revolution, and then a busy week next week. Games on Wednesday means we'll be back with another edition of the show on Tuesday. It does it for us. For the fantasy expert, Jason Saghini, I'm Nick Firchau. We'll see you around next week.